All right, everybody, we're going to get started just in the interest of time, um, so we can make sure we stay on time and we have plenty of time for Q&A. Thanks so much for being here this afternoon to for the next BRESE working group. I'm Gretchen Gigley. I'm Senior Program Manager at the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance, or SEIA. For those of you who aren't familiar with SEIA, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Atlanta, but serving a network of 12 southeastern states. We are one of six regional energy efficiency organizations who promote energy efficiency as a catalyst for economic growth, workforce development, and energy security. Happy to be here with you today. Um, just a few housekeeping items. I see folks are using the chat already, and I'm glad to see that. We love questions, comments, connections, and that's what we hope will happen in the chat. So please bring on any questions or even ask of one another, the participants on the call. In order for everybody to see your chat and see your questions and connect with you, please make sure your chat is set to everyone. I think that's the setting on there, as opposed to just email or just messaging the host or co-host or speaker. So we want everybody to be able to connect appropriately. We do have a poll that I think Sammy, my partner in crime here on the call, is going to share. We'd love to see where everybody is geographically located. So if you could take a minute to fill out that poll while I'm going through the rest of the housekeeping items here, that'd be great. We are recording this, so you will have access to the recording after the webinar. We will be posting these next Tuesday on the BRESE website. You'll get an email with that recording and a follow-up survey. So be on the lookout for that. Okay, let's see. I have a lot of pop-ups here. We have a great lineup for you today. We have Caitlin Rose, the Policy Director for Southeast Sustainability Directors Network, Nicole Lee, the owner of Smart Home Solutions, and Anna Keene, Building Performance Consultant and owner of Keene Living, LLC. Before we dive in, just a couple, a little background on BRESE. BRESE is an effort funded through the Department of Energy. It is, sorry, I have so many pop-up screens here. I'm trying to move everything. It's a regional effort serving 11 southeastern states, and we're really trying to connect stakeholders with tools, resources, partnerships. These BRESE working groups are really critical for this effort as a way to do that. But we're really ultimately supporting energy code implementation and best practices. So we're all working in this built environment and energy code space. How can we help each other move the needle? So that is the goal of the BRESE initiative. Like I said, it's a collaboration. Collaboration is kind of the key word here for this program and this working group series too. It's a collaboration with the Department of Energy, as I mentioned, also Southeast Sustainability Directors Network, who you'll hear from today, and we also are partnering with GreenLink Analytics on this project. One quick announcement related to BRESE. So we have these working groups that'll be happening through this first cohort of working groups through the beginning of June. We also have an RFI out to kind of get an idea of where we can direct funding to help with initiatives focused on energy affordability, building energy code guidance, implementation, workforce and education needs. So it's pretty broad. We are prioritizing projects that are focused around specifically apprenticeship programs, either new or the expansion of existing. And this will help inform how we deploy funding to help with initiatives. The RFI deadline is Wednesday, May 27th. You can visit our website for more information. You can ask questions via our website by using this QR code, and that'll take you to BRESE. So please let us know if you have any questions, and we hope you'll consider submitting an RFI to help guide this process. All right, Sammy, what are the poll results? Where did we land?
Yeah, so we have quite a few people in the room from Georgia that work with Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Northeast regions. So a good variety here today.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing, everybody. And again, keep the comments and questions coming in the chat. All right, I'm going to stop sharing, and we're going to dive into our speakers here. First up, we have Caitlin Rose. She is the North Carolina and Virginia Policy Manager at SSDN, where she advocates and advances state policy priorities, strengthens member resources, and fosters regional partnerships across the Southeast. With a background in environmental science, atmospheric chemistry, and public health, she brings an interdisciplinary approach to sustainability and local climate action. Prior to SSDN, she worked with the Triangle J Council of Governments and the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, contributing to clean transportation initiatives and the development of the North Carolina Clean Energy Plan. Welcome, Caitlin. So happy to have you here. I'm going to pass the baton to you.
Sure. Thanks so much, Gretchen.
Yeah.
I'll get my screen sharing. It's really good to be here and see all of at least your names popping up in the participant window. Gretchen, can you all see my screen? Okay, wonderful. Well, as Gretchen mentioned, my name is Caitlin Rose. I am the policy director at SSDN. So we serve SSDN is a close partner of SIA's in the BRESE Collaborative, and our policy program serves members in a variety of southeastern states. Gretchen mentioned North Carolina and Virginia. We also provide policy services in South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and Florida, and we're looking at boosting our capacity in our westernmost states as well. So if you are a local government in any of the 10 states that SSDN serves and you have a question about state energy policy, feel free to get in touch with me at any point. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about building codes and how they intersect with energy affordability at a high level. So I'm hoping that my presentation can kind of frame up how building codes work from a state level and sort of how that influences the conversation around energy affordability broadly across the region. And then I'm really looking forward to my subsequent panelists' presentations to kind of put that a little bit more into practice for you all today. So I'm going to start us at a high level, just talking about the affordability issue in the region. We kind of live in a bit of a paradox here in the Southeast where we boast about often having really low electric rates, but our region faces some of the highest rates of energy burden nationally. So I've just thrown up a couple statistics to sort of frame this up. 33% of US households currently are struggling to pay their energy bills. We've seen a pretty substantial rise in electricity bills, average monthly electricity bills since 2021, and a pretty high percentage in the Southeast of low-income households that are facing energy burden. So what that means in practice is folks living in households that are high energy burden are having to make some pretty complicated and high stakes decisions about what they pay for each month. Do they pay their electricity bill, or do they pay for things like food, fuel in their car, healthcare, medications, and things like that? So it's a really, for a lot of people on the ground, a pretty high stakes issue. This isn't just a budget or a line item in their budget. It's a point of insecurity that folks in the Southeast are having to make questions or answer questions about on a daily basis. So my hope with this framing is to make building codes a little bit more visible than they typically are. Building codes are pretty archaic in terms of how they're written. They're really jargony. They're documents that are, pretty inaccessible to the average person. But when it intersects with energy affordability, this is really where building codes move from that technical jargon into actual human impact for the lives of residents of the communities we all serve. Building codes, as you all know, are the minimum requirements for building envelope insulation and many other things that happen when someone is deciding to build a development, a home, a commercial building. And when we talk about energy codes, we're talking about that insulation, air leakage, building envelopes, but we're also talking about the health and safety of folks who live in those buildings and their quality of life broadly across the region. So I wanted to take us or to have us pause and take a look at sort of the state of codes in the Southeast. This is just a snapshot. It's not all of the states in the Southeastern region, but I thought it was sort of a good representative example of where we're at in terms of code adoption. So to back it up a little bit, the International Code Council is sort of the governing body that sets model codes that can be adopted at the state level. There is no federal requirement for a building code standard, so this is kind of up to the states. And a lot of, how building codes are implemented depends on the code level that states have adopted. So kind of across the Southeast, we are a little bit of a mixed bag. It's a little bit of a patchwork approach. We have some states like Florida and Louisiana that have moved towards that 2021 International Code Council Energy Conservation Code standard, which is one of the more up-to-date codes out there. But we have several states that are still lagging or frozen in place with codes dating back to 2009 or 2015. And a lot has changed in how we build things since 2009, which makes it raises some concern about the ability of states to build efficient and safe and healthy homes for folks in their states. And so you might be asking yourself, why is it so different across the states? Why does this look, depending on what state you're in, why are you seeing codes that are nearly 15 years different in terms of their adoption year? And this comes down to a pretty jargony legal framework called the Dillon Rule versus Home Rule. So for those of you who work for local governments, you're probably pretty familiar with your state's framework if you are a Dillon or a Home Rule state. But just at a high level, Dillon Rule states local governments cannot take actions unless they are explicitly given the authority to do so by their state legislatures. So that's states like Virginia, North Carolina, and several others in the Southeast. Local governments are pretty constrained in the actions they can take. And then in home rule states, local governments have a little bit more flexibility. They're given the autonomy to make local planning decisions, pass ordinances, adopt zoning codes without, the express permission of their legislatures. But across the Southeast, we are seeing trends of state legislatures preempting local authority and sort of taking away that inherent authority that local governments have to make these decisions. So in Dillon Rule states, local governments are constrained by whatever code the state adopts. And in home rule states, depending on state statute, sometimes local governments can adopt, local amendments that are more stringent than the state code, but oftentimes they are also sort of hemmed in by where the state sets their code. And I will say too, several states, and we're going to talk a little bit about hurdles here, several states in the Southeast also have enabling statutes that either require state legislation to update building codes or have frozen building codes in place. So South Carolina requires legislative action to update state building codes. And if you'll recall from the previous slide, South Carolina's codes are frozen at the 2009 levels. In North Carolina, where I live, the legislature recently passed a bill that froze the building codes at the 2015 Energy Conservation Code level and has put a moratorium on building code updates until 2031. So 5 years from now, that's the next time the Building Code Council will be able to update the statewide building codes. We will have been frozen we'll be, essentially 15 years behind the most up-to-date code that's out there. So there's lots of reasons why stronger codes stall, and there's ways we can think about, from a variety of different levers about how to get that unstuck and moving a little bit. So oftentimes there's industry opposition to the perceived upfront cost of stronger energy codes. And the actual cost over the lifetime of the home is pretty invisible compared to the upfront cost of building to a more stringent, more energy efficient building code. As I said, there's also legislative hurdles in a lot of the southeastern states that need to be overcome to actually update those codes. And then a lot of issues, regionally and nationally with staffing and capacity for actual building code enforcement. Same thing I mentioned, this kind of ties into industry opposition as well as legislative hurdles, but awareness gaps with key decision makers. A lot of times folks don't actually understand the full scope of what a building code does and doesn't do. As I said, it's not very flashy. We're talking about building insulation. We're talking about the building envelope, things that a lot of people who aren't, thinking and talking about these things on a day-to-day basis don't have to usually consider. And again, that upfront cost or the lifetime savings is invisible a lot of times to developers and buyers upfront. And I will say too, wanting to focus more on the positive, there's a lot of opportunity here in the Southeast if building codes were modernized. As a region, I mentioned there's lots of ways that states are lagging behind or residents in the Southeast are facing really high energy costs and energy burden, but that just means we have the most to gain from updating our codes. So there's a recent ACEEE analysis that shows that there's several states in our region that stand to gain the most potential cost savings from updated residential, specifically residential energy codes. And then 3 examples, that's Arkansas, Tennessee, and South Carolina. So something, a pretty quick impact, at least with the residential code, could be achieved around the region in the Southeast. Updating codes also, in addition to having a cost-saving benefit and an affordability benefit for residents, also has co-benefits for resilience. So as we all know, we're seeing increased storms and natural disasters here in the Southeast, particularly as we're going into hurricane season. That's something that I know a lot of folks around the region are actively thinking about. I wanted to point to an example from Florida. Florida, if you'll recall, their building code is updated to the 2021 code level. Those modern codes have been calculated to have prevented between $1 and $3 billion in damage from Hurricane Ian. So that's a pretty real, pretty stark number in terms of disaster response and recovery. That type of cost savings is not something you typically see when you're talking about disaster response. Same thing in Louisiana with post-storm grid hardening and leading to rate hikes for customers. More efficient homes might suffer higher costs there. So, sort of the penalizing of efficient homes is something to consider when we're, if we're talking about states that don't have building codes that are as updated. There's a couple other examples here I'm not going to focus specifically on, but if we're thinking about resilience and energy affordability in tandem with each other, there's a lot to gain in the Southeast from updating building codes. And thinking through sort of pathways forward, just wanted to throw these up here as a visual, but really specifically wanted to talk about ways local governments and communities can get involved in this conversation. Most states, building codes are set by a governing body, whether that's a building code council or a board or a commission. Oftentimes there are municipal or local government seats on those building code councils. So if you are super fired up about building codes, I would suggest taking a look at the makeup of your state's building code council to see, is there a seat that a municipal representative could sit in on and provide input on the code update process in your state. Same thing for communities or local governments and community organizations. When states are updating their building codes, oftentimes that's a public process. It's a little bit, hard to parse if you're not used to paying attention to these things, but there's usually public comment processes if you want to ask questions and raise concerns to those governing bodies. So there's lots of ways to participate in this process. and happy to talk offline about any of that if you're local government in SSDN's footprint, if there's ways to get involved and from that perspective. I think that's all I've got. So hopefully that helps sort of frame up where we're at in the Southeast and sort of where each state stands, and maybe what opportunities exist across the region. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and I will pass it to our next presenter.
Yeah. Thank you, Caitlin. Really appreciate that. Folks, if you're still simmering with everything that's shared, please feel free to drop questions in the chat as we go about. I was wondering, Caitlin, if you could maybe talk a little bit more to tools and resources at SSDN to help,
Sure.
just to give folks insight.
Yeah. So as I said, SSDN's policy program, of which I'm one of the 5 team members, is the primary resource that we have to support local government education, capacity building, and engagement around state building codes. So if you are not already participating, if you're an SSDN member and not already participating in our monthly state network calls, reach out to me and we'll make sure you have access to those calls as a resource. We have prepared several different sort of sample backgrounder documents in the past. So we have some existing resources in addition to the ones that the BRESE Collaborative has pulled together around statewide building codes, as well as the update processes in a couple different states. And we're working on building that out a little bit more across the region. And then we have also worked with our members to help them think through if they are interested in actively engaging with the building code update process, sort of how to frame the local government perspective in that engagement. So if that's ever of interest to local governments, that is what we're here to do and happy to support it.
Yeah, thank you, Caitlin. I got 2 more questions. I think we have time for one
Yeah.
more. I see in the chat, Justin asked, are there strategies for translating energy codes to everyday life, specifically people not in the space?
Yeah.
And you showed stats on energy savings, and it seems like an important component in sharing the benefits.
Yeah, I really appreciate that question, Justin. I think that's something that all of us working in really technical fields could stand to do better. As I said, building codes are really technical. If you open up the IECC and try to read it and you're not well caffeinated and ready to really pay attention to all the jargon in there, it's really hard to understand. And I mean, I'll speak from firsthand experience. When I was first diving into the North Carolina building codes, it is a pretty steep learning curve. So I think as much as we can tie these really technical, jargony, uh, but really important regulatory frameworks back to the impacts that everyday people are feeling, I think we'll be better served. So the more we can say, if a state were to adopt the, let's say, 2021 IECC, this is the bill savings we might expect to see, or this jump in energy efficiency, what does that actually mean for a resident paying an electric bill every month? I think those types of easy to digest hard numbers that people can actually apply to their day-to-day lives are much better ways to message around the impacts of or what building codes do on a day-to-day basis than talking about, the code, the model year, or whatever other technical aspect of the building code as written in state code. So I think the more we can translate to everyday impacts, the better.
Awesome. Go ahead, Gretchen. I'm passing it back to you. Right.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. And I'm just going to make a plug we have another working group on stakeholder collaboration tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. And Caitlin's going to be diving in a little deeper to what stakeholder collaboration really needs to be in this space. So consider joining and we'll talk more about collaboration, which I think is, again, BRESE Collaborative is very key to a lot of the work that we're all doing. Great. Thank you so much. All right, on to our next speaker. We're so thrilled to have Nicole Lee join us today. Nicole is the owner of B Smart Solutions, an energy consulting firm dedicated to bridging the gap between local communities and essential sustainable resources. With a deep commitment to energy equity, Nicole helps communities navigate complex policy landscapes to ensure that modern infrastructure and green technologies are accessible to all. Thanks so much for being here today, Nicole. I'll pass it off to you.
Hi, hi everyone. Don't mind me multitasking, moving spaces. um, but thank you all for having me. I'm gonna try and share my screen really quick so I can present my presentation. All right. And so I'm here to talk about how are we going to fill in the gap and bridge the gap. And this comes in when we talk about community programs that are created to help LMI communities get the resources that they needed when it comes to building out all things energy efficiency. Um, And so we all know what energy burden is and how it impacts the LMI community. We see how every dollar is counted. And within those communities, there are so many programs that are created to help them try to save that dollar, extra dollar that they're trying to recuperate just to help pay the bills. And our goal is to try and figure out ways that we can help them when it comes to being overwhelmed, when it comes to so many pilot programs. Within the community, we have programs that are state-led, community-led, company-led, CBO-led, and our goal is to try and figure out how do you get all of those programs into one space, provide the resources to those LMI communities in one place. A lot of those who are in those burdens are elders and they're not tech savvy. And a problem with them is they become very overwhelmed when it's too many resources in one space instead of being in one place to focus on one thing. If I put in one application, I'm looking for it to replicate against across the board for other applications as well too. And so this is how we're trying to fill in this gray area challenge by identifying who falls through those cracks of traditional aid and market rate aid. Give me one moment. I'm gonna move to another room. Sorry about that. I'm trying to handle a conference at the same time. Okay, and so the ALICE populations, these are people who are asset limited, income constrained, and employed. But I think with the ALICE population, they're also forgetting about with their community, they're limited on resources too. And when it comes to programs such as weatherization programs to help them make those needed upgrades to their homes, they're struggling. We see it every day when we're going out to do the work in the homes and trying to connect them with resources that go across the line is hard because once we do one application with them, it's like, well, why do I have to do a second application? Why can't this one application sub for everything else that we're working on? And I think that's where the opportunity comes in when it comes to creating an ecosystem that will work for everyone. Through that ecosystem, we're connecting utility, state, city, and company leadership layers to create one silo of a program that offers help to everybody across the line. We know that through utility-led program, they're leveraging AMI through their smart meter, and they're prioritizing the leakiest of the homes for immediate intervention. Sometimes we always have those homes that fall in the middle where they might not be leaky, but they can have an old HVAC system. And How are we going to still be able to provide them with the same help? Because their home isn't leaky, but their home isn't as efficient as the next person because they have this very old, inefficient HVAC system that they have had since the home has been built, but they've never upgraded it. And so because they don't have homeowners insurance or warranty insurance, they're trying to figure out how can we get the system upgraded and replaced? Through city-led programs, not every city has a program. Luckily in Savannah, they have a program, a great program where they're able to provide certain updates to your home when it comes to roofing, HVAC, electrical, things of that nature. But for a city that is short on funds, how can they create those same type of programs that help fall in place where, let's just say the utility-led program doesn't provide HVAC replacement? Well, that's where the city-led program is able to step in to provide that additional assistance. And then you also have those company-led as well as community-led programs that are acting as a trusted navigator, which is bringing those people to the table to help them see the resources that are available and stacking the available resources to the residents. Some of the things that we've seen with the programs are reinventing the wheel. I think it's great, but sometimes it could be a bad thing. When you're reinventing the wheel, you're leaving resource dollars on the table. And I've seen it with many programs where they're offering the same type of services that another program is offering, but instead of bringing those programs together as one, whereas I'm only coming in to offer an extra layer for what the other company or other program isn't offering, we're leaving loose funds, which means that program that has good intentions will run out of funding earlier. And because it runs out of funding earlier, that means they have less people to help. Utility data rarely talks about the workforce boards as well as leading missed opportunities and localized hiring. And so that's the silos that people are looking at. And then, of course, the fragmentations is, again, when residents are overwhelmed with multiple pilot programs and they feel like it ignores what they truly need within their home. So with city-led, it's a hyper-local trust. Cities use community centers as intake points, but a lot of time that information does not get out. When you have a lot of elders and we rely a lot on technology, they miss that information. And those are the crucial homes because when you look at, let's say, Greenlink's data for the energy burden neighborhoods, a lot of those historic neighborhoods are where elders live. And because elders are centered there, not everybody is tech savvy. So they're missing out on those additional resources that might be offered at the community center. And so now it's more so of a job where the community, as well as those company-led or CBO organizations, come into play to help bridge that gap to the ALICE population. And not just with providing the energy efficiency programs, but also creating that workforce. The workforce can go from roofing to electrical to plumbing, but it's an opportunity to create careers. And so through the foundation of state and city fund training, as well as company placements, there's an opportunity where, again, this can be a siloed process where if I am going to go through this workforce program, I already have the companies that are able to hire these people as employees, so that they'll have great working jobs. And then it's economically mobile to where they're located. A lot of times, like I was just in Virginia, and you see where we offered this amazing program, but a lot of the work, they have to uproot themselves to leave to work in that specific area. And so uprooting doesn't work for everyone, especially when you have a family and you're trying to give back to the community that you've been living in all of your life and help them with the resources that you have just learned about. And so the impact of resource layering, when we work with the baseline of burdens, utility rebates, as well as build upon and stacking rebates and grants that are available, you create a larger baseline when it comes to energy resilience within these communities. And so here's some of the metrics that we have found. The bad is the silo. That's strict federal poverty caps only when it comes to eligibility. when it comes to workforce is classrooms without placements, and resources are reinventing the wheels per programs. When we're trying to integrate them, using the city bridges for the gray areas, the handshake apprenticeships to careers, as well as layering the ecosystem with 0% burden. And now I'm gonna open it up for questions. Let me see.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole, for sharing. And it's good to see you again. Uh, I think some folks are simmering a little bit with this, but maybe something I'm curious to know. I know because we worked on Weatherize Atlanta together too. What are some of the things that you think came out of that project that were good and bad that helped with this, with filling some of the gaps that we were seeing?
With that campaign, of course, we were able again to connect with a lot of elders. We saw a lot of elders in that program. Um, at first, it started out with just, it was right before the launch of the state-led rebate program. And so those fundings weren't yet available, but it was trying to figure out like, hey, we have the utility-led program. Can we fill them in over here? Or they were trying to go out in the first place and do it on their own. And that's where we saw the drop, where it was an opportunity for us to be able to go in and partner with these other programs. So that it kind of expands the budget. With the budget expanded, you're able to help more people, or you're able to help them in a way where it keeps them from falling through those gaps that we're talking about, where let's just say they need an enabling repair. They have a roof leak. Well, this is where those extra funds that this other program has, instead of reinventing the wheel, we can use those funds to repair the roof. Or they might have a window broken. We can replace a window, things of that nature that's outside of the funding for the other programs. And this is where this fund steps in at, to make sure that this home does not fall through those cracks.
Yeah, appreciate that. I know that work of melding with creating more local jobs and making sure that all of these resources in the communities are actually getting back in the community is so
Right.
critical. So I appreciate you talking to that. One more question that came up is any advice you have for city or local governments, professionals working in this space, if they want to overcome the accessibility challenges?
Partnerships are what works best. Partner with programs that are already existing and building upon what's already there. Utilizing, figuring out where they lack resources, and then you provide that extra resource through your partnership. That way you're able to reach more people. And so instead of me just reaching 50, I can reach 100 now.
Yeah, I love that. And this is all kind of building off of each other because one more question that came up when you were talking is the redundant programs that are competing for funding, and maybe adding a little bit more to why there's so many duplicate programs and what can the states or local governments or even utilities do to help solve that. Was there anything else you'd want to add on to that?
I think again, that's where partnerships come in at. Like if, let's just say, for instance, what GFA did, where GFA went in for the general funding for their rebate program. And then of course they had other companies and contractors come in to help diverse the funding and make sure the funding got to the communities that it needed to. And so let's just say you have another GFA come out and there's this large grant or funding available. They get the grant and then they're able to disperse it on a local level to other organizations that they're working with.
Yeah, appreciate that, Nicole. Partnerships and just keeping engaged with your communities is so critical for understanding what those needs and how to support and get the funding out there. Especially like you said, we can see the leakiest of the homes, but there's a lot that are kind of in those in between that needs the support that community can step up and fill with their partnerships with their utilities and local governments. So thank you so much for sharing today, Nicole. If anyone has any more questions, please put them in the chat and we'll make sure that we connect with Nicole so that we can get those answered for you. I'll pass it back to you, Gretchen.
Great. Thanks, Sammy. I appreciate it. And thank you so much, Nicole, for providing so much great information for this group. Wholeheartedly agree in the power of partnerships and collaboration. And it's great to be able to share how much amazing work is happening out there. And if we can all connect, collaborate, again, that theme of this BRESE initiative, I think there's power there. So appreciate that message and all you shared today. All right, on to our next speaker, Anna Keene. We're so grateful Anna's spending the afternoon with us. Anna is a building performance consultant based in Fairhope, Alabama. Her company, Keen Living, provides technical support, field verification, and training for single family and multifamily projects. Anna partners with nonprofits, including SIA. We've been lucky enough to work with Anna. Field verification and training for single family and multifamily projects. Anna partners with nonprofits, government agencies, and the private sector to develop implementation strategies that narrow the gap between policy and practice. She's a HERS rater and NGBS green verifier who helps clients meet quality standards for efficient, resilient buildings across the northern Gulf Coast. Welcome, Anna. So glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here. Let me get queued up here for y'all. And we're good. Everyone can hear me. Everyone can see my slide. Perfect. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Gretchen. And thanks to everyone else for being here today. And thanks to Caitlin and Nicole for their presentations. Those were very interesting and ties into a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about too. So it's a good group of folks to be on this call together. And thank you to SIA for hosting these sessions where we can connect with others on these issues. And today, so I'll be focusing on the implementation layer between code adoption and the compliance and the outcomes that come from compliance. So that'll be the focus of what I'm talking about. And you're going to definitely hear some echoes of Caitlin and Nicole's points as we go through this. So I look forward to continuing these conversations into the future after this. Okay, and that button didn't work. That one did. Okay. So, as Gretchen said, I'm Anna. I'm a building performance consultant. These are some of the projects that I've worked on. My company works primarily in new construction, from income qualified to missing middle to high end. And we do advanced building certifications and code compliance consulting across the northern Gulf Coast. So, and that's Louisiana, Alabama, and Florida Panhandle is where I've done the majority of projects. So I did want to talk a little bit about kind of what I interact with day to day when I'm talking to contractors and code officials and folks who have these comments when I say, "Hey, what about an Energy Star certification?" or "What's your take on energy code?" What I hear time and time again is that there's no demand, that nobody's asking about it, that the contractors can't do it, won't do it, and that folks aren't even checking it. So they're like, this doesn't exist in my market, is what I hear. But then you talk to people outside of the construction industry or follow the news or take a brave step onto Facebook, Lord help you, and you'll see something like this. Whoa, so many comments. There were so many to pull from, really, when I decided to check this out and put this on a slide. But as you can see, folks want the affordability outcome. There is high demand for energy affordability. So there's that disconnect between the consumer preference and then what the market is communicating to the people in the construction industry. And so how do you get energy affordability? Energy efficiency. So that's the path. So that's just something to keep in mind. Sometimes there is that disconnect there, and to try to bridge that with folks is really important. And I don't know if y'all can see one of the ones that I didn't actually highlight, but you can kind of see on the right side that I wanted to make sure you could see was I live by myself, $250. What the hell is going on? That one just kind of made me crack up. I don't know, in a sad way. All right. So here's the point of my talk today. So focusing on implementation, but this could also be applied to other codes and standards. So specifically, I'm going to share some of the things that I've seen as friction in the delivery system of these energy codes that are blocking market development in the places where I work. And so I'm also going to share a framework that I found helpful for thinking about it and a couple of specific examples of friction and how people are overcoming it. So I'll do my best not to read the slides, but as you can see there, the demand exists, friction suppresses it, some of it can be reduced, and we'll talk about it. So that's sort of an outline for what we're going to cover here today. So in the framework, a good way to think about it, I have found, is to think of it as a user experience challenge. So every person who's interacting with energy code is a user. And all of them have touch points with it that can either have friction or be no big deal. And so this isn't everyone that's involved in energy codes, but this is a big chunk of them. So just thinking of, all right, we've got this code, we've passed it. How are all of these people going to interact with it? How are we going to try to reduce that friction so that it can be implemented in a good way? And with those users, they exist on a continuum. So you have your advocates all the way over to the actively resistant. And so your advocates are going to champion the work. They're going to understand some of the underlying principles and they're going to be completely on board. You've got folks that really are trying, but they just need a little extra support. The skeptics need evidence but can be convinced. And then the actively resistant are going to spread the warnings and tell everyone that it's stupid and don't do it, or that it just won't work. And a good thing to keep in mind is that the warnings do gain traction faster than the advocacy. And so I know for me, sometimes the temptation is to try to convert the resistors. But I would encourage you to, for a better use of your resources, would be to focus on the skeptical and the ones that are trying, and to also recruit advocates to help you bring them along. And then you can get a lot of really good information about what the challenges are from those who really want to do it. They just need a little extra support. And so one thing to keep in mind, going back to the friction, is that the way that you can make a skeptical one more resistant is you can just bog them down in friction. And so one thing to always keep in mind is that every amount, even like the tiniest amount of friction, is adding cost. So there's your direct costs and your indirect cost, but there's the time, there's the mental energy, the cognitive load, and these just layers of frustration that can really make or break how successfully something gets implemented. And so this is something that Caitlin and I think Nicole mentioned it too with the accessibility of some of the information when you're talking about different energy standards. So you have these dense technical documents and conflicting resources and then training that comes and goes and then unclear requirements. And this is just a few, we spend a week talking about how all the friction that could come with any of those users, but this is a few that I chose for today. And these two images that you see on here, there on the left is a insulation table from Energy Code that has all of the climate zones on it, all the different insulation values and energy specifications, a list of footnotes that may or may not apply to where you live. And it's just, if you are at a glance looking at that, there's a lot of steps to figure out what information you need and how are you going to use it. And then there on the right is it's a it's a PDF is what it originally was, but it's a scanned Excel worksheet that is not designed for this use, right? And so if I go and I need to pull a code form to put my results in, I'm unable to, it's hard to read. I'm unable to fill it. I don't really know what to do with it. There's these just all these things where I'm like, how do I use this? How does this work? It's just friction. So not to be a downer, I'm gonna spin this in a positive direction now and show you some things that examples that I've seen work well in the energy code implementation space. So here are a couple of examples. So plain language resources, again, to the accessibility thing that was brought up by the other two speakers. Making sure that you have some at a glance guidance that is written for someone who is busy. And I do want to emphasize this doesn't have to do with intellectual ability. It has to do with just mental energy of like more and more steps to try to actually get to the action you are trying to take. So it's, make it easier for folks who are tired and busy to find the information they need quickly and easily. And then you can, of course, give more detail elsewhere for those who want a deeper dive or who need a deeper dive. But just give that quick glance information also. And then with stair-step transitions, that's really important whenever you have a new process or new rules coming into play. One thing in particular that I've seen be successful is if you're adding something like testing requirements for code, then instead of requiring that immediately, add an inspection layer during a transition period. So say maybe for a year, we're going to do air sealing inspections, and we're going to help you figure out what you need to be doing so that you will pass the test when the time comes. So things like that, and you want to communicate frequently and get those feedback loops so that you can continually improve. Because we're all going to miss things, and having that conversation and that back and forth flow of information is going to make it better in the long run. And then also we have training led by advocates. It's, as all of you know, in the Southeast, it's hot and humid, and especially here on the Gulf Coast, it's extraordinarily humid. And so whenever you're talking about any type of energy upgrades, you've got to cover the topic of humidity and what works in a humid climate. And so when you have someone who's doing a training, they need to be able to speak to that. And also folks that support the underlying goals. So just to give an example of, there are two code trainings that come to mind that I would say that are where this suggestion came from. One of them was a trainer that was from a different region, and he kept referencing energy specs from that region and talking about costs from that region. And it was very confusing to everyone that was there because it's just completely different. So getting someone who is using the right specs and understands the climate. And then another one, the training, the guy, bless his heart, it was the first time he'd looked at the slides. And and he also, it was a Friday, and he straight up said at the beginning, he was like, we're gonna blow through this and we're gonna get out of here after lunch. I was like, no, I want this information. Hang on a second. So so just thinking about who the trainers are and are they going to be able to connect with that local community. And if you can make sure you bring in maybe some local advocates, if it is a trainer from another place, to really do some sort of handoff or introduce resources that are localized, even if you do have trainers from other locations. And then the last one on here is the shared value framing. Messaging is part of the user experience, and we want to include and not exclude. And to that end, depoliticizing across the board and just focusing on things that we can all get on board with. We want quality of work. We want people to live in homes they can afford to live in. And we want a strong workforce, people having jobs that pay them well. I mean, these are fairly universal. So to really focus on that so that folks don't just shut down when we really agree on a lot in this space. And then I'm going to go a little more in detail with two of these just in the interest of time. But then we can connect on others another time. So with the plain language resources, these are two examples that I've seen be helpful that are user friendly here in Alabama. So that duct and building envelope tightness test and compliance certification form, it's got everything you need, right? It's a pleasant font, which does matter. If you have an iPhone, you understand. Or even if you don't, sorry, I hope I didn't just lose the Android users there. But it's pleasant to interact with. It's laid out in a way where you can move through it. You have your formulas right there where you need them, and it's one page, and then there at the bottom it even tells you what to do with it. You can even click a button and it'll send it in an email. So it's a useful form. You can fill it out, you can print it out. It's a solid form. So that's one example. And when this was created at the state level for any jurisdiction to use, but then some just took that and adapted it with things that they wanted to add to it. So it just gives you a base standardized form that you can use if you don't have the resources or you don't want to add anything else. And then there on the right side is a supplemental code, is what they call it. But really what this energy list is it's a summary of this is what the prescriptive is in our county. So it takes all of that code and says, at a glance, this is what we expect from you. And if you want to do something different, we can talk about it. But if you don't want to think about it, just follow this list. And that has been really helpful for folks also who just want a list. And so that's just a couple of examples. And I mean, could they be better? Yes, always. But these are, I appreciate that the code officials, I believe, were the ones that drove both of these. And I appreciated them thinking ahead as to how are we actually going to check this, implement it when the code is passed. And then the other is the training led by advocates, which I already talked a little bit extra about. But this was actually a training. It was a weatherization training. South Face Energy Institute was involved and our local host was Gulf Coast Creation Care. And we had the community action agencies there, and there was a hands-on element where they air sealed boxes as a group. And then there was the classroom element where you had Mike Barsick, everyone's favorite advocate at South Base, who was teaching the class, but then he also invited some of the local contractors. I was there, some other folks, to make sure that we had a local resource that was connecting with the attendees. And it had the hands-on element and visual aids, which people respond to a lot, and the local tie-ins. But on top of that, just being the way life is, offering virtual and on-demand options are very important too, just to fit with people's busy schedules. And so wrapping up here, just to restate, the demand is here. And if we think of energy code implementation as a design challenge and what the user experiences are, then it'll get us closer to reaching those desired outcomes of energy affordability, skilled workforce, and developing the market so that it can really compound over time. And this is me. Uh, this is me, Anna. Please reach out. I hope we'll do some Q&A, but also if anyone has any thoughts about this, thinks I got something wrong or huge gap in what I was saying, or I just want to continue the conversation, also find me on LinkedIn because this is just really important that we share lessons learned with each other and try to move our region forward. So that's it. Thank y'all.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Please, folks, if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. A few questions did come up while you were speaking. So one of them was based on what you just shared a little bit with the training, wondering what's the right amount of training, or is there a certain amount of time and resources? How often should training be done to remove the friction or support in knowing like the most updated information?
I mean, it's gonna depend on the user. Definitely anytime there's a code update, thinking of that as part of the code update, even before it's finalized or adopted, go ahead and start thinking about like who do we need to talk to and how can we get a training schedule sort of together to roll out the new code. But it's really going to vary depending on who's involved. And some of them have CEUs that they could do. Some of them would be just voluntarily, and that also varies across where you live. So, sorry, I don't have a better answer, but it just depends.
The best answer is an honest answer.
Okay, yay, I can do that.
Yeah. Appreciate that. And what you said is very true. It's going to depend on where you're living and what the needs are, and how much is getting updated in one go or not. So I appreciate you adding extra insight on that. And then a shorter question kind of going off that when you were talking about the forms and whatnot. I know earlier Nicole also mentioned accessibility and online and resources. And so I'm curious, what else is being done to make sure documents or things like this are getting into homes or supporting folks who maybe aren't as tech savvy, whether it's elders or folks who are living in rural communities or just don't have that tech savviness?
I don't know what is being done. There are definitely things that could be done. And I will say in preparing this talk today, that is something that I tried to tighten up on and not say, here's all the things that we could do. Because I think that invites a more discussion because there is a lot that can be done, and especially in rural areas that don't have code enforcement at all. Like, how do we support people there and get them resources, the ones that want to know? Because that's another piece of it is like, even if it's not required, there are people that want the information. So let's give them a path to get the information they want, even if they're not required to do it.
Yeah, that's really great insight. And then we also had we'd love to hear your insight more about the role of the incentives and the rebates and financing and helping absorb the new code requirements, and how have these helped shape the market and impacted your work?
The only one that is coming, well, okay, back when there were more incentives or they were not being phased out, it was definitely moving the market forward in a way, it gave us something to talk about when we would talk to folks about here's something to help you get through it, any sort of transition. And in this case, I'm not talking about energy code, I would say like advanced certifications. So because in my markets, there's no incentive for code compliance itself. And maybe there should be, at least for a transition period, because you are asking people to do something different than they have done before. So yes, having some way to pay to get people over the hump is really important. I have not seen that move things in my markets, to be honest.
Yeah, appreciate that insight. And it definitely there's some flexibility and differences. We have groups from all over the Southeast coming in. And really appreciate you. Oh,
Can
go
I
ahead.
just clarify? When I say I haven't seen it in my market, I'm saying we don't have incentives. I'm saying the incentives would help. Um, but we just don't have them here. So places that do have them, please continue to have them and get more of them if you can, because that gets people over the hump. Okay, go ahead.
No, thank you. I was just gonna summarize some of the takeaways. Like, really appreciated also speaking to like when you brought up humidity and some of those issues that aren't always thought of in there. But what you just said is really important. That incentives really can motivate to keep things moving forward. Um, there's one question in the chat, and it sounds like this is more kind of open to any of the speakers, but Anna, since we still have you here, it's Eddie's asking if any of our presenters know, please, and what year did the IEEC code require blower door test out for new homes?
I don't know what year the model code made it mandatory, and in a lot of places it's not mandatory. In Alabama, it is required, and that was part of the 2015 model code passed with amendments. In Alabama, required the testing, but there was a transition period to where the testing results were not required for a year or two, I think, after the code was passed. So yeah, and that's Caitlin saying 2015. So that would line up with that. But still, a lot of places don't check it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good to know, and thank you.
I'm sorry,
Sorry, I
Samantha. I
just
was
wanted.
gonna say, I think there were older versions of the code that had that as like an optional amendment requirement, but I think 2015 was the year that was required in the actual base code.
Thank you, Anna and Caitlin, and Nicole also had chimed in a message to me on that. So appreciate that. And thanks for the question, Eddie. If anyone has any more questions, or Nicole, did you want to add anything more to that question Eddie asked?
No, I think it's the same thing because around 2015, that's when we saw a lot of builders coming in asking for the blower door test.
Cool. Well, thank you all. Really, really appreciate that. If anyone has any more questions, please put them in the chat or let us know, and we'll make sure that they get to our speakers today. But I'm going to pass it back to Gretchen and just give another shout out. Caitlin, Nicole, Anna, really appreciate your time and energy for being here and sharing this knowledge.
Thank you, Sammy. And I'll just say too that if folks on the call, in the spirit of sharing, have examples of good resources or incentive programs in your state or city or in your region, I don't remember if we have people outside the Southeast, but please share them in the chat. This is a way to kind of sharing is caring here. So please, post things that you know about in the chat. I'll also say that Sammy's been putting in websites for each of the speakers, so that you'll have those easily accessible. So please do hop on websites and find more information about the work they do and projects, more inspiration, more tools and resources, and connect to the speakers as well. So, okay, I think we have time, Sammy, for, oh, great, Teresa's posting some resources. So keep them coming, folks. I think we have time for our second poll. We'd love to ask another question, and then I'm going to share a couple more QR codes. So get your phones ready here at the end, and then we'll come back around and see if there are any final questions. So let me share my screen quickly. All right. Here we go. All right, another QR code. We are shaping these working groups around what the need is, and y'all are the boots on the ground, working every day to move the needle in the building and energy code space. And we want to know what is needed. Where can we best support your work through the work that we're doing in BRESE? So we're going to send around a really short survey to try to gauge what our next steps should be, and we need your help. If you can take a few minutes to fill out the survey, that'd be huge, and then we'll look forward to sharing with you, more tools and resources and great speakers in the future. So we'll send you, this is the QR code for the survey, but we'll also send you a follow-up email with that link so you can access it there as well. Let's see. Just a couple reminders, the BRESE collaborative, the recording will be sent in a follow-up email. Those recordings will be available next Tuesday, so you'll have access to those and can please share them out. All this great information, again, sharing is caring, collaboration. So please spread the word and share the information that you learned today. The request for information, RFI, is out, due Wednesday, May 27th. This QR code takes you to the BRESE websites where you'll have access to all of the not only the recordings, but the RFI. And then let us know if you have any specific questions about that. We have another webinar tomorrow on stakeholder collaboration. That's from 10 to 11:30 Eastern. We have a rescheduled working group in June, and that is on resiliency. The specific date and time is still being negotiated, so we'll repost the new time, and we'll make sure everybody on the call knows about it, and hope you can join that one as well. Let's see. And here was the collaborative group. So so now I think have a few more minutes if there are any additional questions, and if we can take a look at where we landed with the survey or with the poll.
Yeah, so thank you, Gretchen. Just so everyone knows, I also shared the survey in the chat as well as the BRESE site again. So if you have any questions or those resources, please go check those out, like Gretchen said. And for the poll, thank you all for participating. I'm seeing a lot of folks saying policy changes and then cross-sector stakeholder engagement, and then some folks talking about funding operations, staffing and technical capacity, and education and training. So it looks like a good variety of what folks would like to see, but policy changes being the strongest in the room today.
That's great. Thank you, everybody, for that feedback. We'll see one more open opportunity for any burning questions. Again, you have everybody's contact information, so you can definitely reach out to the individual speakers or to Sia if you have any information you wanted to share or questions. But anybody have any last minute questions for
I actually have a question.
Please.
For Caitlin and whoever else, but is Caitlin, that the slide where you showed the different states and the comparison with sort of how the different code stuff works in different states, do you or does anyone know of any other type of comparison with that, with all of these, like when we're like, where are incentives and where are they not? And I think it would be really helpful to be the power of comparison, to be able to see across the Southeast what is happening where, and that's how we can kind of see where the gaps are to try to fill in and move it forward.
Yeah, I don't, and this was just me going back to resources that SSDN and partners have already pulled together and just putting them all in one place. But I think that could be a really great comparative, just like one pager of where snapshot of codes across the region. And I think adding in like the Dillon versus home rule context is also probably pretty important.
Yeah.
Because there are some states where local governments can adopt stretch codes or local amendments to the statewide building code. So that would also be important. So happy to collaborate on that if anyone wants to.
Yeah. I mean, I just know a couple of places where I work, some of the things there, but sometimes I just end up like talking past each other because it's
Yeah.
like this is happening here and it's totally different here, even though they're right next door. So yeah, that could help ease that process. So
Totally.
Yeah, and Caitlin, I mean, Anna, thanks for that question because Caitlin, that's might be something that we can work together on
Yeah.
through the BRESE collaborative too, if that's
I'd love
a
to.
needed resource. I think that's such a great idea. So, um, we do have a resources page on the BRESE website. So, and we're looking to build that out, but we have, some case studies and, other websites, that we can share. So this would be a perfect addition.
Yeah, we also had Catherine in the chat adding in that they have all the info. It shouldn't be too complicated to pull together. So
Yeah.
I would
Yeah,
definitely
I
say
would say that's definitely true. I pulled from resources that SSTN and SIA we've been working on kind of in the background to create that list. So I think we have all the high level info we need, just got to make it visually nice to look at.
That's great. Thank you. All right, folks. Well, we may be gifting you back 10 minutes in your day. If there are no other questions, I just want to extend deep gratitude to our three speakers today for sharing your time and expertise. And this is our inaugural working group, kind of kickoff for all of these specific topics. So I really appreciate everybody being with us today, and we'll look forward to continuing to dive deeper into these topics and then bridging gaps. So please, please submit the survey and let us know how we can help. All right. Thank you so much. Take it easy. Have a great rest of the day.